The Gemara in Masechet Shabbos tells us, Masech in Kuf Yutes Amud Beis, Le'en olam iskayim ela bishvil hevel tinoikas shebeis Rabba. That means the world is really being sustained by the Torah that's being studied and taught and learned by the little children. Our Papa says to Abaye in Masechet Shabbos, he asks him, Didi v'didach, what about me and you? And Abaye responds back. He says, "Eno doime, hevel sheyesh bo chet, lehevel she'en bo chet." That means the learning of Tinoika Shebeis Rabban, of little children, is a learning, creates vapor, sustains the world, and it has zero chet. There's no sin, there's no avera, there's no missing, there's nothing there, there's nothing missing. Maseches Chulin, the Gemara says, "En yisurim v'lo chet, en yisurim v'lo yavon." The Gemara tells us that there can't be any suffering in the world, there can't be death, nothing, unless there's a chet. So how is that possible that a child is taken away? Such a sweet child, Yuda Ben Nachman, who I'm sure created tremendous hevel she'en bo chet in the world. The Pasuk says, "V'chol beis Yisrael yivkus ha-sreifa asher soraf Hashem." When there's a sreifa, when there's a chema in the world, it's Kol Yisrael. The entire Kol Yisrael are crying, and the Rabbeinu Shalom with them. The Sfarim HaKadoshim tell us that really we're all one neshama. Klas are one neshama. So that means that when there is a child who doesn't have chet, his neshama is taken away from this world, we have to look into our neshamas. Our neshamas have chet. Our neshamas are the cause of something of such a tragedy. The first place we have to look is into our neshamas. In the time of the Arizal, there's a story. There was a businessman, and this businessman was a very well-known Baal Tzedakah, Baal Chesed. He had children, his wife, and he became sick. And he was very ill, and the entire city was crying and saying Tehillim, and the rabbi got up and said, "It's going to happen, it's going to be okay, it's going to come back, everything's going to be well." And the Maisa, this businessman, was a person who also studied. This person was nifter. And the entire city was mamish, they couldn't speak, didn't know what to do. They couldn't believe it. Where there's midas adin, where there's midas arachamim. And especially the almana, it destroyed her. She was mamish sitting in depression and in sadness. A few months later, there's another tragedy. A young child of 2 years, was killed in a very brutal manner. And the entire city again was brokenhearted. They couldn't understand, they didn't know what's going on, to give us explanations, give us answers. Please, what's going on? A few years later, the almana is sitting in her house, still sad and depressed, and her son comes over to her and says, "Ima, enough is enough. You have to be b'simcha again. You can't be Eved Hashem if you're going to be depressed." And she took her son's words. And that Friday night she got up and she said, "That's it. I'm going to be Eved Hashem, whether I understand exactly why things happen and why bad things happen. But the one thing I know is that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants me to be Eved Hashem b'simcha. That's the only way I could grow. That's the only way I could change myself and inspire others." And that Friday night, when she fell asleep, her husband came to her in a dream. And she couldn't believe it. She was watching her husband, and he was giving shir to thousands of neshamas in the Beis Midrash Elyon. She couldn't understand what's going on. And after the shir, her husband came and said, "You should know, all these years I couldn't reveal myself to you through a dream because you were sad. But now that you took yourself together and you said, 'I'm going to be b'simcha,' I was allowed to come and speak to you. And I want to tell you, my neshama is a neshama of a tremendous tzaddik. And that tremendous tzaddik was a tremendous Talmud Chacham, but that neshama never got married. And therefore that neshama had to come down to this world and marry you, and have kids, and then leave the world. And the Almana said, and what about the child? The child that was killed so brutally. And the husband said that neshama was also a neshama of a tremendous tzaddik. And it needed one tikkun. His bris was delayed for 2 years, and he had to come down to this world for 2 years, to live for 2 years with a bris, and then leave the world. But because the city had certain chatoim that they didn't do tshuva for, this neshama was willing to accept upon itself a death that was so brutal to be mechaper for the entire city. And the husband told the almana, the ikr is, we don't always understand the answers. When we come to Shammai, the Rebbe will give us answers in a second. When Mashiach comes, everything will be clear. Chazal say when Mashiach comes, we're going to make bracha of Atoy v'Ametiv and every bracha dynamics that we said. But the ikr is to continue to be over the Hashem b'simcha. To continue to look inside and say, why is it that we're not bringing out enough good light? How can such darkness exist? It can only exist when there is less light. If there's more light, it's going to overpower, it's going to mitigate the darkness, and that simcha, la Yehudi ma'isa oyer of simcha, oyer zu Torah. The way to bring that all, the way to bring that simcha, is through teaching. And I think the most appropriate nechama that we could have for ourselves and for Yuda Ben Nachman is to bring more light into the world, to look inside of us, realize that the only tikkun, the only chet that could exist is in our neshama, and we're all one neshama. And especially here, in this tragedy, where it was a yid that killed another yid. The biggest tikkun is that as yidin, we start looking more and more to do chesed to every yid, to inspire every yid, to share whatever you learn on Happy Jews website, which Baruch Hashem are incredible teachings. Take that light and share it and spread it. Send it to another 1,000 people. And Yeratzon that we should hear Nechama, we should never hear such tragedies again, especially now during the 3 weeks, we should be Zeicha to see the Bina Beis Hamikdash Meher B'Yamim Omer.